It's approximately 8:15, and I'd like to call the Whatcom Public Utility District meeting to order. Thank you all for coming. Our first item is pledge of allegiance. Please all rise. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So we had a little bit of clarification of the agenda. There's a bill that we're going to discuss, but we're going to discuss it under the general manager report in item number 5. Other than that, I don't think there's any change to the agenda.
We're suggesting canceling the executive session.
And also, thank you, and also canceling the executive session. If there's no other changes, I'll entertain a motion to approve that.
I'll motion to approve with the
Deletion of the executive session.
with deletion of the executive addition of the legislative matter.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'll second.
There's a motion, a second. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Let's move on to the consent agenda, which is 2 meeting minutes. One is our regular last meeting on March 11th, as well as the special meeting we had on March 14th, on which we discussed briefly legislative matters in Olympia, as well as roles and responsibilities at the PUD. There were no actions taken at that meeting. Are there any comments or changes to items under the minutes or the claims for March 25th?
I'll move to approve the consent agenda.
I'll second.
There's a motion, a second. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Next is our public comment period. So whether you're online, please raise your hand. If you're in, please rise and make a public comment. We will have another public comment period at the end. And if there's no comments now, we'll close the public comment and move on to the general manager's report.
Thank you, commissioners. A couple of quick things, and then I want to talk about Bill 5466. So first thing is I'm going to go off on vacation next week, and I'm gone for about 2 weeks. So the first meeting in April will be Kurt will be filling in for me as GM, and you'll have signature authority and everything else while I'm gone. The week after that, I'm in Spokane at the storage meeting, Europe Energy Northwest, if I remember right. And that was because we were both going to go to the battery meeting, but then.
Correct, yeah.
So I'm actually out of the office for 3 weeks, but that third week I'm fully available just in Spokane. So I'll be, like I said, available.
So the week of April 6th. Or 7th. 7th.
The 16th, yeah.
Oh, okay.
So I'll actually be out of the office from April 1st to about April 14th or so.
Okay.
So that'll be fun. The next thing is strategic plan. I'll give you a quick update on that. Finally got all the paperwork cleared on that, and we're looking for a kickoff meeting that first week that I'm back, so the week of the 21st. And we'll get everybody involved. If you remember the Mall Foster presentation, they start off with a meeting with staff, and they have a meeting with commissioners, and then there's a whole bunch of meetings, you know, and but that's how it takes off. So we'll get some stuff on the calendar, but be informed, and we're about to launch on that.
So since you brought it up, can we talk about the strategic planning now? Is that what you want to talk about too? Or I saw you're about to say.
Well, yeah, I just wanted to clarify on the time frame. But yeah, I think it'd be good to talk about. Like, do you mean an April schedule or?
Oh, did I say
Or May or?
No, it's April.
In April, okay,
Yeah.
So I'm suggesting we talk about strategic, since Chris brought it up.
Oh, instead of
rather
the
than D.
business, yeah.
So,
Mhm.
so at our 14th meeting,
Mhm.
Karina had some thoughts that culminated out of our meeting that might really be beneficial to David and team.
Oh, absolutely.
So are you incorporating her input into that?
All of that.
Okay,
And
just checking.
yeah, and in addition, Karina and I agree. She wants to make the meetings, the roles and responsibilities, teamwork building meetings more frequent. And we've kind of landed on a recommendation of quarterly. if you guys are okay with that, I'll start setting up special meetings, at least quarterly with Karina.
Yeah, that's great.
And that'll establish kind of the cadence, and we'll have some follow-up and action items and, personal to-dos, that kind of thing.
Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you.
As far as frequency, I don't have a problem with starting quarterly. We may not keep it quarterly.
Okay,
in
if you
subsequent
guys,
years.
if you don't see any value, if you want to strung out more.
I've certainly got value from the 14th. There's no question. I just can't predict.
Yeah, I can't either, neither can Karina. Her suggestion was that, we're meeting with her 9 months to a year apart, and her feeling is that it makes it really hard to make progress as a team with that much space. I totally agree.
That I agree with.
And, I also agree with your point that, between that kind of, team building, organizational development type effort and the strategic plan, they're really tight linkages. So, absolutely.
Sorry, you got cut off twice there. Can you-
No, not really. I support having more of these meetings. I think it's valuable. So if it's quarterly or, I guess, but so if we met in March, I mean, I could see it'd be a long time to wait until June to have a meeting with Karina, right? So,
Well, part of it is if Mall Foster, if they look at it and they say, well, if you guys do more work on your vision, values, and mission offline, we can incorporate that directly. And that's, they develop or they develop in conjunction. So, my suggestion would be not to wait until June, but,
Right.
Late April, May, somewhere along there.
yeah, recognizing, in April, there's I'll be 2 weeks out because there's Energy Northwest meetings followed by the week after the WAPUDA annual conference in Clark County. So, and you'll be gone through, I guess if it's like if it was a special meeting, like the Monday of our second commission meeting in April, or I don't know, it's just some of these things to work around if we're gonna, but I think, by at least in the last days of April, having the strategic planning meeting, was that what you were thinking in like the end of the month?
Mhm.
Okay.
Well, actually, that week of the 21st, I've kicked over, to that Monday. I don't know if we're all available, but at least it's clear on my calendar and the majority of staff, and then Thursday and Friday of that week. And then I just left it open to Mall Foster because they gotta get their team together too. So it's, if those 3 dates don't work for you, ping me back with something, and that's enough time for us to get a special meeting and get it calendared.
Yeah, okay, so I'll just get, we'll just get you our dates that are block out and work that out.
Yeah, probably that'll be through Joseph.
Through Joseph, right,
Yeah.
for sure.
So I will kick that over to him.
Yeah, but that is, that's great. Look forward to starting that process.
So the next thing I'd like to talk about, is, Senate Bill 5466, which I guess now has a House Bill number and it's over in the House. This was the one that talked about creating another committee at the state level to oversee transmission planning and permitting. So I've had a chance to read it and I've studied it, and whatever discussion you guys want to have, I'm ready.
Well, this was something we discussed, of course, at PUDA meetings last week. And I also, I discussed it with Representative Rammel, who was, working on amendments to the bill, some of which to satisfy what PUDA was asking for, and also getting into some, I guess there's some issues raised with tribes and other stakeholders, knowing that it's, that the bills, whatever form it's going to move through is going to probably be with amendments, but it does have an executive session scheduled for this Thursday morning in the House Energy Environment Committee. So I guess, Chris, I was hoping if you could maybe better explain some of the concerns you had, because I guess we're just I'm not seeing what you're seeing when I read it.
So before we do that,
Yeah.
I just, for Jamie's benefit, I think it might be helpful just to let Jamie know what happened at WAPUDA.
Yeah.
And you can share now, then I can share briefly just to catch Jamie up to speed of because you weren't there in the energy committee meeting.
Oh,
So,
yeah, for sure, yeah.
so should I go first?
Yeah, why don't you go? Yeah.
Okay, so, first thing is, I, at the energy committee meeting, it was briefly expressed that Wapuda had expressed opposition. In the committee meeting, I, raised the point that, it was my understanding that when Wapuda opposes a bill, it means Wapuda disagrees with the intent of the bill. And, if I said I found it strange that, Wapuda chose to oppose this bill because we do agree with the intent, but we have concerns about its implementation. And that was duly noted. After the energy committee meeting, I had a conversation with Dave Warren, who's not Wapuda staff. But Dave Warren used to be Wapuda staff. And Dave Warren is under payroll by Wapuda as a contract lobbyist. And Dave is not handling this matter for Wapuda, but he does have an understanding of this issue. And he expressed some more moderated sentiments on the subject, saying that, yes, the intent is to increase transmission infrastructure. And he, for his clients, has put forward a pathway and is speaking to Representative Rammel. And the important point here is that he's a moderate voice that's trying to bridge the gap, even though it's not really his job to do so. And I appreciate that very much, because the head for energy for the governor, the general governor doesn't get involved with particular policy legislation like that, has testified in favor of this bill. And it's a reasonable estimate would be this bill is going to pass with or without our support or engagement. So a straight out opposed approach is probably not wise. Because it leaves us with an inability to bring any of our concerns to the table. When I say us, I'm talking about Wapuda. Now, I'll also say that I also see the advantages of this approach as Bill is proposing, rather than seeing it as a problem. But that's the background I have for the meetings last week.
Was good. I understand it as, I mean, Wapuda is making their call strategically. I mean, I think they shifted from stating concerns and getting some amendments and such into, after it passed the Senate, to move to an opposed position to be, taken more seriously, maybe. I don't, it seems like a lot of I mean, there's maybe some just fundamental disagreement about the approach, while agreement on, the goal to get transmission built in Washington State. But
That's a funny way of showing support for the goal.
yeah, yeah, I mean, it's like I've heard, like I wanna give due, I definitely take seriously the concerns of, folks like Chris and people that have a lot of experience, and other GMs and other people at other utilities, if they're really seriously seeing, saying that this isn't gonna hit the mark, we have to take that seriously, right? But as far as reading I've heard from others though, is that they're not really seeing where this would be adding additional steps or creating new grounds for litigation or any of that. Which I understood to be some of the concerns as far, I mean, I get there maybe just be a general distrust of that there would be the execution with state capacity toward this endeavor, but I think we're in a place where if we want to really dig in and come up with some specific amendments, we would be listened to, and we could probably,
Yeah.
In addition to having Wapuda at the table, just given our relationships with some of the players.
So I have just a pretty basic question. How does adding to the process help streamline the process? In a very pointed way, like this, we shouldn't have to talk about this in like circles, right? Like something very, how does that help? How does adding to the process help the process?
it's not adding to the process, it's adding capacity to the planning process. I mean, it's adding support into the process that already exists.
Well, I mean, that is
It's more
adding to
resource.
that is adding to the process though, right? We are talking about an addition to the process. And you're calling it capacity, but I guess I just don't see it I don't see it as adding capacity. I see it as adding, and this is just my opinion, like I see it as adding an opportunity for extra roadblocks to a process that already takes decades in a time when we don't have decades. That like, I think this is gonna be one of those things that we probably aren't going to agree on. And I also think that it's really important that you listen to the people that have the knowledge, right? Like if all of the PUD GMs are saying, wow, this is a bad idea, if all of the energy people are saying it's a bad idea, it might be a bad idea. You don't think that's a bad idea?
And I don't think all the energy people are saying that at all, and I don't think all the GMs are saying that at all. I think that there's definitely, what we need to do is listen to the people that we have access to, and that's Chris, and so we absolutely need to
And it's
listen to Chris.
Wakuda,
Yeah.
right?
It's a, so let's just be clear. When Wakuda takes an opposed position, it's not polling and getting it doesn't require a unanimous vote from all the commissioners and all the GMs at
Sure.
Wakuda. There's many things that the way it works is that most people stay silent because they have no horse in the race. Actually, Wacom is a relatively small horse in this race.
Right.
Right,
Yeah, we're not in the
yeah.
transmission business, so.
So, that's important for us to
Yeah.
realize. And so I just want to be clear that it's not a unanimous, position, at
It
all.
surely isn't,
Yeah.
but the majority of people in rooms at Wakuda are saying that they're opposed to this. The majority of the energy people that are in rooms are saying that they don't agree with it, and I think there's a reason for that. And I think some people have been super articulate about the reason for that. And again, like, we're gonna spend a lot of time discussing this when we all agree that we're like, transmission isn't our thing. But I just want to, like, it's not just Chris that thinks that this is probably a bad idea.
Oh, for sure.
I think that the road to hell is paved with good intentions, and we see that in Washington State quite a bit. And just gonna throw out my 2 cents. I don't, like, if nobody can clearly articulate to me in a sentence or two how this is making this process easier, then we're just wasting time, even in this meeting, on a process that's going to make things more difficult. Like, I don't, yeah, that's my 2 cents, and I'm happy to, listen more from you all, but.
Can I?
Yeah, of
just
course.
add some information to this? So the last time the GMs met was about 8 weeks ago. And when we reviewed this legislation internally before all these additional markups, it was unanimous. There was no dissent. Since then, a lot of GMs go out, as I would, and their commissions have said, no, we're actually for this. And then guess what? When you talk to that GM, what's their position? Well, gosh, my PUD is for this. Doesn't matter what they personally think. So that's important to remember. So there's a lot of that going on, because it was unanimous. There were no dissenters. This is from people who've done this before. This is a really bad idea. I can almost go through line by line, but it is, everything in here. This is just like the Inflation Reduction Act. It's got a title and then it does the opposite.
So I think what Eddie said, identify, probably not a line by line, but probably a few top, things that you have concerns over. And
Well, so, a few top things. So first of all, when you look at the charge of the thing, the charge of it is to develop all non-transmission options first, and then and only then look at transmission options. And part of the problem will be that alone provides a field for litigation, because anybody who wants to stop a project will say, you didn't look at non-wires, you didn't look at conservation, you aren't considering tribal impacts, And it will be a separate process, so they will be able to go through and say, well, we did the SEPA, you know, we had our objections. We went to the CPU or the UTC, we had our objections. We went to this board and they didn't listen to us and we'll see in court. And that's exactly what's gonna happen. It's absolutely set up for that. The 9 members are purely political, except for the tribal representative and, the labor representative. They claim that this is somebody that is gonna represent people who actually know how to build these things. It's not. It's gonna be somebody who represents the unions. And they'll be selected by L&I. And it'll be through the government. It'll be typical. So the 9 people that they have overseeing this board, none of them have any actual experience in transmission building, getting the job done, not a single one. Maybe you'll get a lineman in there who has actually done some reconductoring, but that's far different than project managing an entire transmission project start to finish. Typically, the people who actually build it are only there after the kicking and screaming is done. And all they know is, oh my God, I've got 18 months to build this thing. And they're involved in that. So you've got a process that's set up where the last thing that they consider is actual transmission capacity increase. You've got it governed by folks who are political appointees, not people who actually can help this process along. And I mean, it just goes on and on and on. Then there's another transmission needs assessment that has to be done. So people can claim, unless you've done this particular 20-year view of it. And right now, remember, each one of the EAs has to do their own 20-year review by 2026. The new FERC. Yeah, it's a 20-year review that's due. In the West, we're doing it in WPP and in each BA. BA is balancing authority. I guess we need that authority to put that in. And this, you know, it's just another place where people are going to attack and they're going to say, no, it's not, you didn't include enough conservation, you didn't include enough non-wires, you didn't include enough reconductoring. And that's how you get to the point where you don't need any new transmission in your 20-year forecast. Just, it's a whole other avenue of attack that's built in here. And, you know, they talk about incentives, and essentially the incentive is that it forces the UTC to give a higher rate of return, 200 basis points, to a investor-owned utility that invests in non-wire activities. I mean, it couldn't be any more blatant than that.
Where's this non-wire activities part of time?
That is in section.
Oh, I see it. Actually,
Section,
you're on page 6.
you know, it's on page 12. It's in part 3, section 12, subsection 2. An incentive rate of return under this section may be allowed only if the company chooses to pursue capital investments in grid enhancing technologies or reconductoring with advanced conductors. In this case, the incentive rate of return allowed is blah, 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 up to 200 basis points, 2%. So, I mean, it's really pointed at that kind of a solution, and that's what this whole thing is. So I pretty much said my piece. It's more of that. That being said, I don't think that any utility or energy person's opposition is going to matter. It looks like this thing's going through, so you know, buckle up. It just means we're probably not going to build a new transmission line for 20, 25 years.
Okay, so I want to summarize comments that you made, Commissioner, and comments that you made. Some themes about them. For me, I detect a substantial amount of almost contempt for the public process.
Please don't put words in my mouth. If you're going to summarize your own comments.
Yeah, I'm telling you how I read what you said.
I do not have contempt for public process. I have contempt for NIMBYs that have used public process to stop needed projects.
So I'm entitled to my own opinion.
That's fine.
And I think about our geothermal project. Why did we decide to partner with the Nooksack tribe is because a wise person incorporates input up front instead of waiting to find out months after engineers have been doing drawings and spending money about the viability of a project. And that's exactly how I interpret the approach that this legislation is doing. There's ways of doing that better or worse. If you start with that assumption, I mean, I've run a small business and I needed to get things permitted. And in my small business, I secured what's called a coastal commission permit in the state of California. It's the hardest permit that you can possibly get in the state of California, and that's saying something. Because California's not an easy place to get something permitted. And the way we got that permit was by partnering with the city of Pacifica, California, by partnering with the fire department and unions, and incorporating all of their input way up front. Now, that is an anecdote. It doesn't reflect our realities. But I'll tell you where I'm coming from as a commissioner, as a business person who's gotten difficult permits. What works, in my opinion, in this new world we're living in, it's not shooting from the hip. And by purely entrepreneurial drive, and it supplies this situation as well. The desire, the intention of making something big happen and not taking in all the agencies, all the cooks in the kitchen. And we agree there's too many cooks in the kitchen.
Yeah, too many cooks in the
And
kitchen.
that-
And I want, before you go on though, I need to address something that you said. I do not have contempt for the public process. The public didn't ask for this. Political heads asked for this.
Public's asking for
The
power
pub-
supply.
They are asking for power
Yeah,
supply.
yeah.
They don't, as a matter of fact, if you ask anybody on the street what they know about transmission, and they don't care, they don't need to care. All they care about is when they turn on the switch, does the power come on? Does the lights come on? This is
Right.
being asked for by politicians. So this has nothing to do with contempt for the public process. As a matter of fact, you're talking about projects that take 20 years. You don't think there's already systems in place for the public to comment? In Hermiston, they've knocked down, they've stopped power being put in transmission line for 20 freaking years. The public did that. Like at every turn. So, I mean, once again, adding to a process is not going to streamline a process. And I think it's, I'll just say this in plain terms, because I've already been told that I have contempt for the public process. To me, this is lunacy. This is insane. And I have two questions when it comes to policy like this. What's the problem being solved and how much does it cost? So what's the problem being solved here? Do you think it's gonna make it faster? Is there any proof that it's going to streamline this process?
The problem that's being solved,
We're talking in a vacuum.
you wanna go ahead?
Well, recognizing that, okay, regardless, I think there's reasonable debates to have about approach, and it's important, I guess, in any case, it's at least there's some attempt being made. I can't say with like total confidence that absolutely, I don't think anyone can, that this will solve the problem. But I feel like
No.
everyone could agree that there has been a failure, right?
Mhm.
And there's different diagnoses of why that was. And what I am pretty sure of though, is that what other folks are proposing as the alternative path to this, just remove regulatory barriers, railroad over property rights, railroad over, just like try to like cut through, limit process as much as possible is not going to actually lead to transmission getting built fundamentally because of our system of laws. I don't think, I think to a certain extent, you can try to change the rules of the game, but there's also just a better way to play the game. And that's what this is. This is playing the game better under the existing laws that we have.
But,
Exactly.
so talking about the process longer is going to improve the process.
There's a public process that exists where there's opportunities for participation. That's just a framework by which then people, if they have a motivation to get it built, they have a motivation to not get it built, they're gonna engage. A lot of opposition or issues or challenges with projects get solved through stakeholdering, through people getting outside of the formal public meeting and actually sitting down and figuring out, okay, what are the mitigations, what are the assurances we need that will make this work? How do we satisfy these interests so that we're not destroying a salmon habitat at the same time that we're getting this transmission line across a creek? Like it's like these things are resolvable, and that's the point of this, is to have people with capacity that are gonna help the local governments, help go directly with stakeholders, work through that with the goal of getting it built. And this language about, of course, you wanna, to the greatest extent possible, maximize the amount of, increased capacity you get through existing rights of way, because that's the easier way to expand capacity. Like, yeah, building a new transmission corridor is a last resort because that's the hardest way to do it. So of course, we should be trying to do everything we have, and also recognizing that we need to do that too, if we want to connect to new sources like new wind generation, right? So I would like maybe if we're all a little more generous, rather than call it contempt, just call it frustration. Everyone can agree there's frustration with the process.
Yeah, and exactly what I'm referring to is that the problem is, and I think just to explain further, the public process is the process we have today. I wasn't saying contempt for the public, I'm saying for the process. And I personally also have concerns, frustrations with the current process. I won't use the word contempt. The point is that it's a very frustrating process, and the public is
But
also
you made
frustrated.
an accusation that Chris and I have contempt.
I didn't say that at all.
You did, we can play it back.
Play it back.
Yeah, you
What
even look
let's
at all
play
of
it
these
back.
people, they heard it.
Let's
They
absolutely play
heard
it
it.
back.
You said
You
you had
absolutely
contempt.
said
You did.
What I said is that I detect that the two of you, your comments reflect a contempt for the public process.
There, you said it again.
Right, and so the public process is not the public,
No, I don't have
It's-
contempt for
and
the
I didn't
public
say that.
process.
and you interpret that I said the public, and what I said, contempt for the process that, another way of saying it is exactly the same intention as saying that the two of you express a contempt for the system we have in place.
I do have a yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
So is that easier?
Contempt for
Is
the
that easier
system.
is that less offensive? It's the same statement. And
No.
I understand that there's contempt for the system we have in place because it doesn't deliver transmission. We haven't delivered transmission as a community. Those of us that are responsible for delivering transmission have failed to do so. And it's the public itself, the individual citizens of this state, who are suffering because we haven't succeeded in our responsibility. And we can say that that's because politicians are involved,
That's right. It's the political process that has nothing to do with the public process.
or
And this is a political
Or we
process.
can recognize that government is us, and we're the ones who instantiate government. And instead of having contempt for what we do, government is what we do together. That's what government is.
That's why I'm fighting this.
Yeah.
That's why I don't agree.
So what we do together is not succeeding. And so the point is, people are proposing legislation to change how we do what we do together. That's what we're talking about here. And so to have frustration is understandable, but to live in that frustration by saying what we have is not working, what we have is not working, what we have is not working, let's get rid of what we have, that's not a solution either. What we're talking about, Eddie and I are talking about, is how do we change what we have? How do we adapt what we have to be more functional? And so what I'm hearing
To
back from
do
you is,
anything but
this doesn't
deregulate.
do it. This
It
doesn't
doesn't,
do
it
it.
doesn't do it.
But let's see
I mean,
something
you
that
can
does.
gaslight me as much as you want, but it doesn't do it.
So my view on this thing is if you just had this piece of legislation alone, you'd go, okay, here's another process that you can run that will get a lot more people involved and have lots more opportunities to say no. The problem is the whole rest of the process that this doesn't touch. That doesn't change. You're at a minimum 20 years to get a major transmission project built. This, I believe, will add to it. As simple as that. It's just as simple as that. And in terms of contempt for the process itself, I mean, remember who it was that said, yeah, we should talk to the tribes up front with geothermal. We should in fact talk to the tribes up front in Point Roberts and make sure that we do everything right up there so that we actually get a result, which we want, which is people served, nobody offended.
Yeah, we all agreed on it.
My point is that this is something that was initiated internally without the commission helping. And the result is, you know, the fact that we are using the public process as appropriate. It is what it is, though. We can't make it go any faster. We can't make it any more efficient. For digging a small amount of land up in Point Roberts, it appears to be something workable on a 2 to 3 year time frame. In terms of building transmission lines, it's just not. And adding something to a process that already doesn't work, it's not that it's a failure or anything else, it just flat doesn't work. So adding more process to that just makes it worse. Just simple as that.
Well, yeah, again, just my counterpoint simply. Part of the slowness of process is because of its lags and just the time it takes to process when there is a step. And adding more staffing capacity and focus and attention to that can make that go faster. To expedite, but granted, whether that's through, we did that through FSEC perhaps, maybe there's just reform over the way FSEC handles projects without having to create a new body. In any case, I'd just like us to see, if we're saying no to this, or you know, if there's disagreement, we're just gonna be neutral as an organization on it, or to specifically support amendments to it. I think those are our options, but either way, I'd like us to also see us come up with perhaps the alternative that we would prefer.
Yeah.
And granted, we're not the most important stakeholder. We're not in the business of building transmission. We will be to some degree through this geothermal project. But you know, it's.
And the kind of amendments that I think I'm gonna interpret, what would be really helpful right now is that we have a potential need for a transmission line along, either reconducting, whatever, along Highway 20. And then over to, the appropriate substation of Buncombe County. Are there things that we can do that will, add resources to that kind of project, or incentives that would help that kind of a project get realized as far as an amendment? I think we would have a very receptive ear if there's something like that we can incorporate into this legislation. And so instead of taking the approach of this is a bad thing, let's oppose it, what the purpose of this whole conversation, and I'm sorry I hurt feelings in the process, is about taking something that's going to happen and making the most of it. That's all I'm trying to do.
Well, okay, I know that you try to bring people together on things. I will oppose it because it's my right. But I also don't think it impacts, you know, it's going to pass regardless. It doesn't impact this commission much at this moment, right?
But it could.
Potentially, there's already a transmission line up at Highway, where there's a power plant up there, right? We have there's a dam. Yeah,
More than 2.
so you're talking about like a small connection.
For short range.
Yeah.
Connect, yeah.
Well, actually, no, but
No, not small.
no.
There's a capacity, we would have to reconduct or additional lines, right?
Yeah, you need different voltage.
Yeah.
You need new lines,
New lines.
Maybe new towers too,
probably new route.
new route too,
That's my assessment.
okay.
You'll have a new route in Whatcom County, you'll have a new route in Skagit County, and you'll tie in to a Bonneville facility in Skagit County.
Okay,
Well, at the rate we get stuff done now, I'll be dead and gone by then.
Well,
again, that doesn't do it.
But it's the truth. I mean, let's
So-
talk in truth.
the way that I approach the geothermal project, which is different from this, and not a legislative mindset at all. It's more, who do we get involved directly in the project? And it's going to be tribes, could be Energy Northwest, could be a lot of folks. And then when it comes time to begin permitting, design and permitting for either the plant or the transmission lines out, you've got some built-in spokespersons, and then we approach it the way we have with the adjudication. And we say, for this project, we need an exemption, and here's what that looks like. And then we begin working with Congressman Randall or whoever replaces him ultimately, because this will be 15 years out. And that's the approach that I would take. Adding another legislative, regulatory barrier doesn't do it for me.
Well, like I told you,
Yeah.
we can all agree that the process is not serving anyone.
Yes.
Yeah,
And we have
It's-
different hopes about this legislation, right? Is realistic to say. We have different hopes.
we have
Some
very,
Yeah,
have
it's just-
complete
it's-
doubt and
yeah.
doubt in it, and some of us want to be choose to be optimistic.
you know, like, we gotta wrap up this conversation probably pretty soon, but like,
Yeah, we have
At
about
what-
5 minutes.
at what point do we start deregulating some things? I mean, at what point do we say, you know what, the greater good is more important than your property right? We already have a process for that, but like at what, it's not that I, wanna just plow through people's yards and put transmission up and, like, I'm not a crazy person, but, I think that we're
Yeah,
up against
exactly.
we're up against the clock here, right? Like, and, at what point do we say, this is more important that we get this stuff built, that we are, if we're gonna push electrification, at what point do we make that process easier? I don't, like, I've never, ever seen anything made easier by people sitting around talking about it. It's just, it's frustrating. I share your frustrations, I just have a different perspective.
I have seen things be made easier by people sitting around talking about it.
Yeah, me too.
Actually,
A lot of things.
I've seen again and again, I see like with industrial projects happening lately where the industries have learned they had to actually deal with the public and actually had a stakeholder in the pre-permitting process to then make the project go smoothly and get a simple, relatively quick SEPA process with a mitigated determination of non-significance, and that's the standard procedure now.
Like a terminal that's being built in,
The
a
state,
propane terminal that's being built right now in Everson because of our collaboration with the community.
well, that's just one example, yeah.
One of many
But
examples.
there's SEPA is just simply not the barrier. It just isn't. Like it's almost like SEPA just does not present a barrier. SEPA is largely a process that favors the development of projects in reality, and with transmission's its own animal because it has to move, it's interjurisdictional. That's what makes it challenging. It's a long route to have a lot of people along the way around it. A lot of different geography, it makes it complex inherently, but it's, there's municipal, like whether it's working through, updates to municipal code that need to happen in advance, thinking, there's all kinds of things I think that are beyond the function of what FSEC does currently or other federal agencies that are working on it. They're just not doing it. And to a certain extent, if it's too hard to build because of the environmental impacts or the social impacts or the routes you have to go through, obviously, we do need to be we do need to figure out how to maximize through existing corridors and by, upgrading, expanding the voltage with existing rights of way, and orienting our development around that. There's just already a lot of constraints with where we can build stuff. We have mountains, we got rivers. It's just, I don't know,
I don't think the difficulty is environmental though. You said with environmental impacts and I don't think the big difficulty for transmission is the environmental impact, right? It is certainly the I hate to use the word NIMBY, but it's the impact to, people, right? And their rights.
Yeah,
Yeah.
people don't,
Yeah.
sure, and when I just want to better understand what we mean when we're talking about removing barriers and removing steps for opportunities for appeal in the process, limiting those.
I'm not talking about removing barriers with this piece of legislation. I'm talking about not adding barriers. I'm not talking
Yeah.
about removing
what this legislation
Yeah.
is adding staff and resources.
Yeah, and what, do we know what the cost is associated? Anybody?
I mean,
Five new people.
there's some, yeah, there's some, it's a budget, it would be a budget item for sure,
Yeah.
but I
That's what
don't
the
know.
governor's office has weighed in. It's
Uh,
surprising that the
Yeah.
governor's office has weighed in support. That's, to me, that is like, and I was like, this is gonna happen. We can either have an influence on it, or we can say, well, more process or more people is a bad thing, and, you know, kind of a dogmatic position, which is what I see here.
So the former chief regulator of the state being in favor of more regulation surprises you? And it's just to be clear.
Again, that's so loaded. I don't
It's what it
believe,
is.
I don't believe in this kind of loaded contempt for our system as a way to improve the system at any level of government. That's what I'm trying to get at. Yes, it doesn't function, but like, there are things that don't work in my own family. Okay, I love my family. But the solution is to not be mad at my brother or my uncle. It's like, okay, what do we do next? How do we work together? If I say, oh, you're always gonna not let me do that. That's what well, this is, government is our stuff. We're in government, let's not lie to ourselves. We're in government, we gotta make this thing work. And this is happening. How do we influence it in a way that makes it more functional? I'm not saying we, at another time, I'd love the managers committee to create a subcommittee to propose pro-transmission legislation. And I say that to my colleagues, I can't talk to the managers, you talk to the managers. I talk to my colleagues at PUD in the energy committee all the time, why don't we propose more legislation?
Yeah, and like you, because I think we have to move on to other things in the agenda.
Yeah.
But maybe I'll propose if, well. Okay, well, I'll just say like, granted, this is a long-term problem to solve, and the amount of strong concern and urgency not to do this, we're hearing from certain folks. I think it would be a mistake to like rush through and pass it, when there could be more time taken to perhaps figure out approaches that, if it's not everything everyone wants, at least it's something everyone can agree on. So Chris, like if say, you know, they were to do what's called like a striker amendment, where they just take the title and the beginning of it and strike everything else and replace it with something maybe it's a lot shorter and simpler, either with anything in the bill that you think would help or anything in substitution of it, like, you know, that's always a possibility. It may not be, you know, maybe it would, you know, it may not get done this session, maybe in the future, but I think the fact that it's a priority to get something done in the reform to get transmission bill, let's not forget that, right?
Well, I think you hit on the key earlier, Commissioner. The thing that distinguishes these projects is that they are in fact interjurisdictional.
Right.
And the thing that would be very helpful would be to have a single state level government agency that usurps all of the local jurisdictions and allows a single bite at the apple at the state level.
Isn't that FSEC?
No, because they sit there and everything is still subject to local planning commissions and cities and everybody else. So it's, and FSEC, it's all of that stuff and FSEC. Now it's gonna be all of that stuff and FSEC and this committee. That's my concern.
Well, but when FSEC, when a project opts for FSEC, then the county doesn't handle the permits in the SEPA, FSEC does. I mean, there's some local level permits they have to grant, but the SEPA process and the general public process is.
Yeah, I have explicit experience with it. Yeah, as some cellular towers went up. I have explicit experience with that.
And those were interjurisdictional how?
It had to do with new cellular towers that were approved by FSEC. And county planning staff told us at the planning commission that our approval didn't matter, it was coming to us for review. But unless there was a actual health or safety impact that could be proven to a particular group of people, like near a school, for example, there was no jurisdiction. It was very limited. There was some jurisdiction, but very, very limited. So it went to review, yes, there was comments, and the hearing examiner could have challenged it. But it would have been a lengthy and difficult process.
Well, the first time I see a transmission project get through in Washington State, that'll be great. But I've been here off and on since '06, haven't seen it yet.
Mhm. We absolutely need to change things. And I would like to see all
Let's
of
end
this.
on that note. We all agree. We
Yeah,
gotta
and let's
change
do
things.
this, yeah. Thank you, yeah. Yeah, I mean, in a way, it's like, it was somewhat a philosophical conversation. It's important to recognize too. About how do we get out of this situation.
We can arm wrestle about some
Yeah.
of the details
Yeah,
later.
yeah. Okay, so, conclude your,
That
gentlemen?
concludes my GM report.
Okay, let's move on to the operations report.
Kurt, still on?
Yep, I'm still here. Sure. Morning, commissioners. Just a quick thing. I just want to say a good job to the crew, the water ops guys. We had all that rain over the last several days, brought the river pretty quick and fast, and also was a very dirty river. We had over 500 raw in the Nooksack. And again, they took care of things as usual. They did notice they have a little trouble with the chemicals, mostly because they're getting close to doing a wash down of the basins. And so they're going to push that timeline up a little bit. You know, wash downs, as you know, we empty the basins, hose them out, get all that dirt out of there. But I just want to point out that the crew did really well and commend them again, as usual. And that's the only thing I have to say at this point.
Thank you, Kurt. Are there any questions?
No,
So, the river, as I ride over, the river, the color is so different, right now than it is when other times when you have a lot of suspended solids. So does the nature of the suspended solids change how you treat the water?
Well, there is factors that account for it. Like right now, it's a lot of probably like soil runoff, where then at later in the year when it's more of a hot, later in the year where we get kind of the glacial till. So it affects how much chemical needs to be used, but at the same time, we don't really change the process that much.
No, there's not different chemicals for organics versus.
No, not a different chemical. We still use the polyaluminum chloride.
Just curious.
Yeah, if we were making potable water, there would be a definite difference. We'd be modifying the chemicals based on the input, like the fecal coliform and
Okay.
everything else, but we're not. So it looks like a great idea.
And the river's really high right now, at least compared to what it was.
Yeah.
And-
Nowhere near
Yeah,
flood stage, though.
it got to the action stage, but it never got to what would be considered flood stage. So it was up there, but not really in the flood
And any
area.
concerns about that over the next week or two?
No, I think the rain's finally supposed to taper off a little bit. I mean, it'll keep raining, but it's not supposed to be like the last several days. And we're got a big warm up coming too, so I think we'll be fine.
I think the only thing to worry about, I was watching the news this morning and they were saying the atmospheric river's pointed right at us and it's going to be warm starting tomorrow night. So, I guess it's possible if you have rain up high, like 7,000 to 8,000 feet.
That's what my friends in North Baker were saying, yeah.
Yeah, if you have that, you can have sudden pulses down the river. None of that right now is forecast, doesn't mean it can't happen.
Yeah, the forecast is for the river to come down.
Any other comments? All right, Kurt, thank
Great.
you.
Thanks, Commissioner.
Thanks, Kurt.
And thanks for managing messy water. Okay, let's move on to old business. And we covered the strategic plan, I think, so we're just gonna be doing broadband adjudication and geothermal.
And I'd like to call on Andrew for the broadband. Let's see, there he
Can
is.
you hear me? Good morning, commissioners. Sorry for not being there in person. I'll be running a PowerPoint later in the agenda. But the update on broadband is related to BEAD and round 2. So we are essentially taking the same project areas that we presented to all of you in the first round, and we're sharpening our pencils for round 2. And round 2 will end May 16th. So if there's any new project areas that we decide to pursue with a private partner, we'll bring those back to you as well to keep you in the loop. But right now, like I said, we're just trying to sharpen our pencils and get below what's called the high cost threshold that the state broadband office has set at $7,000 per location, or BSL, broadband serviceable location. And our numbers, as you recall, in round one, we presented to you were 2-3 times higher than that $7,000 per home pass. So in round two, they being WISBO, will allow for not only an all fiber build, but a hybrid build. So you can have fiber and wireless, including LEO, low Earth orbit options. So all those become viable technologies, whereas round one was just fiber only. Round two allows you to be a lot more creative and technology neutral as you approach serving every underserved and unserved location in each project area. So lots going on right now. And like I said, we'll bring back to you the project areas that we plan to apply for in round two prior to May 16th.
So, we, just to clarify, I had some some one-on-one conversation with Chris on the subject of broadband. And we did get an informal notification that we'll be selected for Point Roberts, but by the way, it's indirect information or direct information?
I'll defer to Andrew on that.
Okay.
Sure. So what I can tell you is we have not received any formal communication from the broadband office that any projects have been awarded or funded. What they have told us is that project areas that have been preliminary funded but not yet announced officially from the state broadband office, those project areas will be removed from the maps. And when we look at the round two maps, one of the project areas in Whatcom County has been removed, which is project area 60, which is Point Roberts. So I'm confident that Point Roberts will be funded through the Port of Bellingham and the private partner application that they went through in round one. The remaining project areas are game on for round two. And we have new private partners that are interested in partnering with the port in a public-private partnership in round two. So there's more folks coming to the table in round two, which is exciting and I think good for the community.
And so when do you estimate you'll have a proposal or request for support from this commission on how we intend to pursue round two?
Well, go ahead, Chris.
What do you need?
Well, I was just gonna say, we've already got that. You guys have said pursue it.
Okay,
And so what Andrew's doing is working with third parties to get hybrid solutions now that are below the target cost, and then that'll be our submission. And even if we can't do it, we can't get the target cost, we're gonna submit it.
okay.
Just because, you know, in round three, WISBO may directly negotiate with people. And so the other thing is, you know, in terms of what WISBO is doing, I don't expect anything official on round one or round two until round three is concluded, because that's when they're gonna turn around and start. Right now, they're totally focused on round two. They're not worried about wrapping up the procedures and paperwork on round one. They're not worried about negotiating a contract on round one. They're worried about getting all of the project areas bid in 1, 2, and 3, and then they're gonna turn around and start doing contracts.
So we're gonna go for it again for round two.
Yeah,
And
that was the guidance you gave us.
yes, I know, I'm just really delighted to hear that. Because it's a disappointment, we've got a little, I mean, maybe you guys aren't disappointed, I'm disappointed that we didn't prevail, so to speak, on more than one project area.
We're absolutely disappointed.
Okay, I didn't want to speak for you, but I felt disappointed.
Well, on the other, I'm disappointed, but it's also consistent with how they set the parameters of the
Yes.
project up.
Not surprising,
Yeah,
okay. And I just applaud our team for their efforts and continuing efforts, and I want to say that one thing I learned attending telecom meetings is that there's some confusion about round two and round three. There's some aspect of concurrency which is not exactly clear to me of round three. On their timeline, they're showing round three is also opening up. even though in the guidance that they provided, they say that round three won't begin until round two closes. So do you have any more insights on that issue?
No, but I think when you look at the nature of round three, it's a non-competitive round. So as soon as round two is closed, that means that WISBO is free to negotiate with whoever they want directly. It's not competitive at that point. In other words, everybody's already had 2 bites at the apple. Now we're just gonna award. So I would expect WISBO to reach out the day after round two closes. They'll make some quick determinations. Okay, this, out of the 200 projects that are proposed statewide, they'll probably fund, I don't know, 100, 150 of them. And then they'll immediately turn around for the remainder and start direct negotiating with somebody. Hopefully that's us, but it could be Starlink. I mean, we just don't know. So, anyway, that's how I understand the process.
So what I'm about to say is an oversimplification, but the reason that project areas were not awarded, this is an oversimplification. Were awarded in round one is largely because they exceeded a $7,000 per home pass threshold. And many, I don't know, probably most in Washington state, as far as BEAD applications, cross that threshold.
I can only speak for Whatcom County. I'm sure Andrew has a little insight in Skagit, but beyond
Yeah, I
that,
spoke to Angela, not in person, through Deborah, and as well as some other PUDs had that same experience, exceeding that $7,000 threshold. It was discussed in the telecom.
I think all of the customers that are inexpensive to get, that are lucrative, already got. And that's kind of the problem. And the cost quest targets were built on averages for customers already served. And if you've already served the cheap ones, it makes a low average. And
Natural bias, looking in the rearview mirror. Yeah.
Yeah, and round
So I
one
think that-
was, oh, sorry, am I talking over someone? The
No, go
round,
ahead, Andrew.
round one, again, just as a reminder, was a fiber only submission. You could include cost estimates for a hybrid round or a hybrid solution, but in round one, they wanted to see primarily an all fiber build. So I think the numbers that we submitted in round one, it's not that it was too high. That's the true cost to build the network. Right. So trying to get to a $7,000 per home threshold and saying that, our submissions were, higher or too expensive, I don't think that's the case. I think the network design and the network budgets that we put in for round one is the true cost to actually build the network. And what they're saying now is the amount of money that they have available, which is $1.2 billion, equates, if you just take all the homes that are unserved across the state and divide that by that number, you get to $7,000 per home pass. So I think naturally we're going to get kicked into the round two hybrid solution. So it's no surprise to me that we're where we are today, with only a few of the project areas being funded in round one for an all fiber build. So I think it was inevitable that we were going to get to this point in round two, just my opinion.
And our team has just shown a lot of, from what I see, flexibility and adaptability to changing criteria. So thank you guys for that.
Any other questions on broadband?
Let's move on to educational.
So as many of you know, Ecology has sent out the summons.
I got mine.
Yeah, we got our 5.
And I'll say it's interesting they did not include the statement of facts that have been filed with the court, nor did they specifically identify what the water interest that a party has, so that itself could be issues. This case committee has recommended rules and responded to the court's request for information of why we propose certain rules, like a 3-month stay rather than a full year stay that the court was looking at. We responded to that. Last week's meeting was canceled as a result, since we don't have any further direction from the court at this time. The court had been working on some other rules, and we expect to receive those or response to our letter. So we're in abeyance at the moment.
Go ahead.
I got my document. Nothing to say. Oh, well, I guess I should say there's a lot. Have you heard from the public?
Oh, heck yeah. yeah, lots of.
What are
fun
you
stuff.
hearing?
Well, I think for some people, it actually took them by surprise, which was surprising to me, because we've been talking about it for
Yeah, sure, we live in a bubble.
years, yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of fear out there, and a lot of people don't know, do they have to hire an attorney? Do they, is this something they can do on their own? Trying to assure people they have time and take it step by step, Lots of talk.
What public input are you getting?
I have not been receiving much.
Okay, so I've had about a dozen people call me, in the last week, and I've directed them to the county. Not John, sorry, John. I know you'd love to field those calls. But, and, also I attended the Whatcom Conservation District meeting, and there's been someone attempting to produce a film. Have either of you two, or has Rebecca heard about this film?
I have,
Okay. There's a film that somebody's trying to produce to try to be helpful.
I think, isn't the Ed Water Board involved in that? I don't know if they're.
Yes,
Like
yes.
a tutorial type film?
I have no idea, but I would just urge us and our staff to be careful, because they're going to be collecting testimonials and other information. And and I made the same comment at the Conservation District as a member of the public, is that this is true about the Conservation District, but it's certainly true about the PUD. We're trusted. We're trusted by various constituents in this community. We worked hard to build that trust. We should be careful that no one makes editorial comments that could be taken out of context. Just let's just be really careful, because films are funded, and whoever funds a film sometimes has disproportionate influence of what the film's thesis is. I just want to be careful.
You telling me to wash my mouth.
I'm actually wearing John's hat.
My alligator mouth will get my canary butt in trouble someday.
Yeah, I'm just saying, let's all just be really careful, because something we say could be taken out of context. And we are here as an entity, the PUD is absolutely a bridge builder, and don't want to be taken out of context, so. Sorry for stealing your thunder, John, but if you knew what I was talking about. you would
I don't know,
probably say
I don't.
I'm channeling you.
I haven't heard of the film, I'll make this editorialized comment, it's not a legal comment, that ecology has been engaged in a significant community outreach that is underscored by public relations strategy. I think it has the unintended consequence of minimizing the potential effect of the adjudication on people's lives, because they don't want to be government, I'm here to help you approach, which this is a lawsuit which affects someone's asserted rights. And so the public relations overtone in their communication says it as an unintended consequence, I think. That is not always helpful to individuals trying to understand their scenario and what they need to do.
Yeah, we have to be sober, unfortunately, but not carried away. Okay, so, anything else on adjudication?
Yeah, just, I was at the Ed Water Board, and did you comment on that last week?
No, I didn't.
One of the real interesting things, they made another request of funding from the county to help their, I forget what they call it, but it's where they host people that come in and they go over their rights and help them dig through, the water rights and all that. And they help, I forget the number, 300 or 500 farmers last year, and they're looking to do that again this year. So, I mean, there's a lot of people out there that are trying to make this work. And, I think all they did for folks was say, hey, here's your parcel. Here's how you find all the water rights attached to that, and they just walk them through
Yeah,
that.
they're doing a great job.
Yeah, I think they are. I think it's very helpful.
And the consultant, AESI, that they've hired is doing the head of that?
Oh,
Great guy,
Jay
Jay
Manning.
something.
Is Jay Manning?
No, that's that former
Jay
director of
Chanel.
ecology.
Jay Chanel, thank
Jay
you.
Chanel. Great guy,
I knew it was a Jay.
great team.
Yeah.
Great team. And really, but you got to reach them.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, this is the leading a horse to water, but you can't make him drink kind of thing. And, there will be people, I predict, that, they'll be noticed at some point that their rights have been revoked because they didn't participate in the process.
Mhm.
And they'll go, what process? What are you talking about?
And we're all
How
trying
do
to
we handle
minimize that.
that?
We're all trying to minimize that.
Right.
Yeah.
But I mean,
Because that's a black eye for all of us.
well.
To
Yeah,
some
I don't take it that way. At some point, you've done everything you can do and
Yeah.
more.
I know.
And you just kind of go, well, they were asleep at the switch.
Mhm.
And it's not a black eye on me, it's,
No, I mean, yeah, I know, but our community suffers when that happens.
yeah. Anyway,
Okay.
that's it for adjudication. Ag water board's good.
Anything else in adjudication? Let's move on to geothermal.
Well, Andrew, I've got a quick update on that. On Energy Northwest, they asked us to participate directly in a project for them to go out and do some prospecting and some studies. But basically, it was an extension of the Fair Play studies, and they were really looking at the basins around Mount St. Helens and then the ones over in eastern Washington. And that's where they were gonna go. So we declined to participate directly in that, but we did write a letter of support, which will be important in their application. And this is a Department of Energy, DOE, federal grant that they're looking for. So just a heads up, we're supporting other geothermal things around the state as appropriate. If nothing else, we write letters and say this is a really good project and we support it. And we do. Andrew, anything else? That our project is just in process. So I don't have any updates on it because we haven't got a new report back from the consultants.
Yeah, no additional update for me at this time.
Okay, so I read an article on the subject of geothermal, and we've gotten lots of positive, but this was negative on geothermal, particularly in enhanced geothermal. And it raised two things, and I just wanted to make sure it's on your radar, and I'm sure it is, but it's
Induced seismicity is probably one.
it brought up induced seismicity, and actually induced seismicity has maybe we need an acronym. And someone.
No. No.
Ah, yes. Maybe there's a project that actually got canceled because of induced seismicity that I heard about. And then the second thing, that I want to bring up is density. So my initial view of geothermal and density was that, well, you're just, going down drilling on a path like you do with, oil extraction. But apparently some people think that you need multiple pads. And the reason you need multiple pads is because the distance between, resources and the consumption of heat as a resource, might demand that. And so that's just another thing that came up as a concern is that the density is not what some people are saying. It could be worse. And so, obviously, if we have to build multiple paths, that dramatically increases the cost and complexity potentially. So I just want to bring those two things up and make sure they're on your radar. That's all.
Yeah, so I don't know which project you're talking about that got canceled. There's been dozens of them actually.
Okay.
And there were a couple over in Europe. The problem was they were drilling right into faults and then pumping fluid into the faults. And that's just not a good plan, just flat out. And so we're very, very sensitive to that. The reason the project has been extended this summer is to do additional fault mapping on the side of the mountain so we can avoid it.
Okay.
And then the second thing is when you look at, can I do the drawing board just for a second?
Yeah.
So when you look at what Hero is proposing. So you've got. Let's screw this up royally. You got ground level here. And so what Hero is proposing is that you drill down. And then you frack between these pairs. Now they can actually go laterally almost 90 degrees. So, you don't, so the issue is how much land do you encumber up here? And the answer is a lot less than what your field actually reflects. So this was the first thing. Now, this region that Hero was looking at, and I may not have the numbers exactly right, but they said that the reservoir that they expected to be able to establish in the 200 to 300 C was somewhere around 250 megawatts. Again, go back to the study. Then they said, well, that's interesting because as you go deeper, the temperature goes up, right? So the same footprint, they're saying drill new pairs deeper in the same area, drill right through the field. And then you frack, and this thing is at the 300. So it's 450 degrees centigrade. And so this is a, what they call a high enthalpy field. And so the water that comes up lacks surface tension once you get into high enthalpy. So it behaves like a gas with the density of water. So it's an amazing fluid at that point in terms of energy content. So what they were saying is that the impact on the surface can be minimized if you do this to, oh, and by the way, I think this one, Andrew, 600 megawatts? Is that the deeper one?
Yes.
But between them, they're 850, and that's why you can't use a standard 115 line coming out. This is, if you get both of these, you're at a 500 kV line. You're probably not even 230, probably twin 500s. So a home run on geothermal. So the issue is you avoid fault lines, and that's how you reduce the induced seismicity or eliminate it completely. And we don't know where all those are. So that's part of the final extension for 6 months to map all this stuff out. So with that, I will shut up.
And thanks to Lisa for getting the study on the website.
Yeah, yeah. Director, many people, yeah, now it's interesting that our activity is getting a lot of people talking about geothermal throughout the whole community, and we need to send them somewhere to focus their enthusiasm on something that, hey, it's happening and we're working on it. So.
Well, I guess Andrew and I have both gone out and given presentations to, you know, there was a group of gals that were part of the Washington County Democrats down in, what was that lake we were down by?
Lake Padden.
Lake Padden. And, you know, just, we're happy to do that. So if somebody wants to know more about this, direct them to me, direct them to Andrew, we go.
I'm doing it all the time, yeah. We're on calls together.
And we're happy to do it. It's, you know, it's good PR.
Just remind the commission we have an hour.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have, we're in a good place now. We covered the strategic plan. Let's move on to new business and, let Brian do his, final
Is final.
presentation, his last labor.
Commissioners, if you don't mind, can I just sit here and?
Yeah.
You can do whatever you want.
Would that be better if I moved over? All right.
So what's your coffee cup there?
Yeah, that's water, so. Thank you. I'll mention that, Andrew is agreed to run the slide projector today, so hopefully he's got the carousel full of slides ready to rock. One thing about geothermal, the last conversation, one thing I got out of it is if we move forward on the project, we should negotiate a no-fault contract.
Humor still intact.
Yeah, sorry for.
Came with a sense of humor.
Yeah,
That's like the.
What I'm gonna cover today, are Bonneville power sales agreements, which is means by which we get power supply from Bonneville. And I'll talk a little bit about our existing contract and then contrast that with the new contract, the new agreement that's pending. We'll be signing that fairly soon. So moving right along, I right up front stuck some of the acronyms and definitions. This is only a subset of what's in the contract, but just touching on a couple of things. One, the contract watermark is in both contracts. And really it's the maximum amount of energy we can purchase from Bonneville on an annual basis under the contract.
In
And
tier-
that's tier one price power.
Okay.
So we have first access as a preference customer to Bonneville's power at a tier one price. We're the only ones that can get it as a preference customer. And it's measured in average megawatts. It's an energy
Per second.
designation, even though we get capacity from Bonneville. What we're purchasing is energy measured, the amount of energy we consume in an annual basis. And we consume it in megawatt hours, but it's converted to average megawatts. And that tells Bonneville whether or not we're over or under that high water mark. The other thing I mentioned is net requirements. Bonneville, we have the right to purchase all our requirements, our load needs, purchase power to cover that from Bonneville. But what we purchase is the net of our total requirement. If we were a utility that had its own resources, whether it's geothermal or something else, Bonneville would provide us the net of what our total load is minus what our generation is. So that's the obligation on Bonneville's part. They are called power sales agreements. A PSA is not a professional service agreement. So, next slide, please. We're going to talk about a little bit about our existing agreement. And you know, I look back, since I've been here at the PUD, we've had we've had two agreements for power supply purchase from Bonneville, and we're about to enter into a third one. So I've been involved in all three. But the interesting thing, the contracts themselves, which is just an umbrella, contract doesn't contain pricing information or megawatts or anything. It's just the basic framework for what you can buy and under what conditions. But these contracts, in the development of the contract, basically pick up whatever the issue is going on at the time. And so the contract before this one, the regional dialogue contract, although it didn't get a label really, it was developed during the West Coast energy crisis. And that contract, it was a great concern that we're gonna have a shortage of power, and Bonneville was concerned about would they have enough to serve customers or not, and what the price would be, and so forth. So in that context, the contract before this one was only 10 years long, because nobody wanted to, risk what's gonna happen. The regional dialogue contract came about for a different reason. There were several, sort of in that period when that contract was being developed, there were several things going on. And one of them was a couple of attempts to privatize Bonneville. And they got pushed back by the Northwest delegation, but the thinking was, well, if we want to forestall this going forward, let's negotiate long-term bilateral contracts that you would have to go to court to break. And so it'd be very difficult if somebody would privatize Bonneville, then you'd have to basically assign those contracts to the new entity, and it could be court proceed, whatever. And bearing in mind that Bonneville currently, there's 136 preference customers that each have a bilateral contract for power purchase with Bonneville. So make it more difficult in terms of the takeover. The other thing was Bonneville was always the supplier of last resort. So there was a big concern that Bonneville's costs would continue to escalate, and that utilities that were experiencing load growth were basically being subsidized by those that weren't, because Bonneville had postage stamp rates. You're all paying the same for power supply. And so that brought in the concept of the tiering of the rates, so that those utilities that were experiencing load growth, once they got above a certain point, they had to pay a higher price for that power. That protected those small or those non-growing utilities from subsidizing the load growth. And so tiered rates came in at that time. The other thing I mentioned here is that the regional dialogue contract is quote unquote a 20-year contract, but the reality is the actual period in which it's actually enforced and you're buying power from Bonneville is about 3 years short of that. I think that regional dialogue is, contract is 16 years, actual implementation, something like that. Under the regional dialogue, customers were offered 3 different prototype contracts. There's load following, which we have now, you buy a block of power from Bonneville, and then you'd have to do all the shaping to make it work for your system, or a slice where you're actually getting, as the output of the federal system comes out, you take a percentage slice of that output. The PUD shows load following because that was the situation we were in. We didn't have the ability to manage our own power supply. So under load following, Bonneville basically manages it for you. If we were to take block or slice, you're now into the power supply management business. And you either have to staff up to do it yourself, or you have to contract to have someone do that for you. So you're moving from what I consider low risk, load following contract to higher risk power supply portfolio management. And some of the manifestations of that high risk are, one, you have to carry a lot higher reserves. Because particularly with the Bonneville system, with hydro goes up and down, you may experience a period when you're exposed to the market, or you have to do something to supplement the Bonneville supply you're getting. And the only way you can carry those swings is to carry a lot higher reserves and have risk management tools in place. Counter supply contract, you really get into the power supply business at that point. And we didn't go there. That contract, the existing contract, does allow for non-trivial purchases. And so you can do that and still get your main supply from Bonneville, but split off and start covering your tier 2 exposure with an alternate resource. Next slide, please. You got the network. Back up, Andrew. I'm sorry. Can we go to the slide of the power sales agreement, Andrew? There we go. You were right, I was wrong. I just wanted to show you this for a couple of reasons. Number one, this is only the first page of the table of contents for a power supply agreement. Total agreement, we have a Bonneville's over 200 pages, including exhibits. But the point I wanted to make here is that the new contract that I'll talk about in a minute, quite similar provisions. Those provisions have been developed over 20-year period, 20 to 30 years between Bonneville and its customers. It's not individual development, it's customer groups. PPC is a big group. When Bonneville proposes a new contract or every rate period, that's PPC's main job. It's contracts and rates. So, if I was to go out as an individual utility and want to buy power from Power X directly, I would negotiate. And I wanted to buy a lateral contract, wasn't going to do it through the market, I would negotiate directly. In the case of a Bonneville contract, all that negotiation is between Bonneville stakeholders and Bonneville prior to the contracts being offered. So there's once the contract's offered, you don't sit down with Bonneville and go through each of the provisions. The only thing that really matters at that point is what form of contract you want, and also what your load forecast looks like, how much energy you're going to want, and are you going to use non-federal power. So there's limited things that you actually tailor your contract to. Next slide, please. Provider of choice. Here again, It's got a name to it. You won't see that name on the actual contract. It's not gonna say provider of choice power, sales agreement. The reason this name was chosen was the context at the time when the contract was developed. There was a growing concern that Bonneville's costs were escalating. And that utilities, when the next contract came up, they want to move off Bonneville in mass or in large amounts. And leave Bonneville, holding the bag, or small utilities that don't have a lot of flexibility. Stuck with paying a lot higher costs because the big guys left, because they had all options. So Bonneville set out on the course to say, okay, how do we assure we get as many preference customers back in the fold as possible? How do we offer them options and make us the provider of choice so they won't seek alternatives, and hence the name. This contract's gonna be another long-term one, 20-year agreement. We'll actually, I'll get into the timeline in a minute. The actual agreement will be signed at the end of this year. But the implementation won't be until 2028. And which is fiscal year 2029 for Bonneville. Here again, Bonneville will cover your full net requirements if that's what you want, all federal power, no non-federal power, but you do have the option for, I can't imagine anybody exercising the option not to take all the tier 1 price power they can get. And there'll be a contract high watermark in the new contract. The old contract, the existing contract, also has a rate period high watermark. They can vary rate period to rate period based on the forecast of the federal hydro system or federal system output. And we've seen that over the years. It will vary. One of the times the rate period, a couple of rate periods ago, we were actually exposed to tier 2, not because our load was growing, but because capability of the federal system dropped. And so everybody proportionally gets less, and it forced us into tier 2 priced power situation. The other thing I think is unique here is basically Bonneville, based on the federal system capability, is allocating every bit of their firm power capability to preference customers. Basically, based on our load forecast measured over a certain period, we get a percentage. Commissioner, you mentioned we're a small horse earlier. We're real tiny. In terms of allocation of Bonneville power, we're 0.4% of their system output. Snohomish PUD, last time I looked, was around 17 or 19%. They are the biggest single purchaser of Bonneville power in the region. Who's number 2? Is it Clark? Clark was number 2. It kind of varied between Clark and Cowlitz PUD. Cowlitz PUD has a large industrial load. And so they have always been a big purchaser of Bonneville power, even though Cowlitz also have some of their own generation. They're going to offer the same 3 flavors of contract once again. And it's the full requirements, block and supplies. And here again, they'll provide support services if a utility elects to purchase non-federal power. And to supplement or to reduce their exposure to tier 2. Next slide, please. You ask me questions, I'll just roll right through this and listen here. We got some decisions coming up. What type of contract do we want? Whether we're going to purchase from Bonneville to cover both contract high watermark load. That's a decision to make. And then if we do decide to take non-federal power, what type of resource do we want to purchase? And, you know, sort of a further add-on to that is, do we want to develop our own generation? Yes, we're looking at geothermal. And or do we just want to acquire non-federal via a contract? Or be exposed to a short-term purchasing market? All those decisions that to be made. Let me give you a flavor, a little bit of our exposure to tier two, because that's where all the action is. I mean, decisions. Under our current contract,
Andrew, could you go to the next slide?
oh, next slide, please.
Thank you.
Under our current contract, our contract high water mark is 27.23 average megawatts. And the rate period high water mark is lower than that, so we're subject to the lower amount for the rate period. Which is 26.83. Now, if you look at actual consumption on the part of the PUD in fiscal year 2023, our electric load was 26.23. So we actually we didn't need any tier two, we fell under the rate period high water mark. Looking at this fiscal year, which ends in September, and forecasting forward for the final few months, it looks like our load is going to be 29.61. Well, what happened there, you know, load growth? Well, the refinery is adding a process here pretty soon. It's supposed to be the end of this quarter, which doesn't look like it's going to happen. Probably next quarter, that load will come online. And that load will instantly force us into tier two. That it's interesting under the contract because Bonneville probably won't charge us for tier two price because our entire load was above the rate period high water mark for the year, but rather for the final 3 months, that load increase will show that we're using more load following, and they'll charge us the load following rate, which is a market rate, but anyway, tier two exposure will really begin contract wise next fiscal year.
26 fiscal year.
Yes, and that's gonna be an interesting thing because the next rate period, which is, we're in a rate period setting process right now. That rate case that's going on right now, the result of that rate case with the administrator's record of decision will be implemented starting October of this year. The rate period is going to be 3 years, so we can close out the contract. So the rate period high water mark that hasn't been set yet for the next 3 years will determine how much tier two exposure we have. The next slide, please. Right now, you know, at the 26, so you assume, I'll just assume for example, that it's gonna stay, the rate period high water mark will stay about the same for the next 3 years, or the 26 number. For the new contract, we will not know what contract high water mark is until next year. So planning beyond the next 3-year period, we won't be able to firmly pin down how much tier two exposure we're gonna have until we get that number. But Bonneville, in their preliminary proposal at the start of the rate case, threw out their numbers. And for us, it doesn't look like, there's several adjustments based on your load during fiscal year 2023, which is done. And, you know, whether or not you're experiencing load growth, how much conservation you've done. Take all the adjustments into account, it looks like we're gonna be basically have about the same contract high water mark as we have now. Might even be a pinch less, I mean, infant, you know, 0.3 average megawatts or something less than that, but it's it's not gonna be, we're not gonna get a big gain in contract high water mark. So we will definitely have cost exposure to tier two under the new well, the next 3 years and beyond, we'll be in tier two territory for a portion of our power supply. Next slide, please. That graphically sort of represent that, but the bar to pay attention to is the gray bar. That's tier two exposure in average megawatts. So in FY 23, that minus means we were actually under the rate period high water mark, so we didn't have any exposure. FY 26, which is coming up starting in October of this year, and going forward, our forecast is about 29.6 average megawatts for our total system load to be. And so if that forecast comes to be, our exposure is about 2.78 average megawatts. So 29.6 total load, roughly 8 average megawatts, tier two of that 29 load. So it's a higher price for tier two, but it's a small percentage of our overall exposure, our overall load. Then if you move out right now, everything's done on a forecast basis, so forecasts are wrong. If this is what it looks like right now. In FY 2029, you're looking at a total system load, our electric system load of almost 36 average megawatts. And the reason we bumped up yet again is not because of any organic load growth or anything, it's that the refinery is adding another process load that will bump us up to that level. And they're adding that from about FY 23. So we're seeing growth coming chunks, which is typical for we're an industrial utility. Our exposure in that rate period or in that period is almost 9 average megawatts, still 9 out of 36. So a quarter. We've gone up to a quarter of our power supply will be priced at tier two rather than tier one. Okay, well, moving on to the next slide, please.
I guess a fifth, right? One apart and four apart, but it's 4/5, 20%.
So what do we do? What do we do with that tier two load? Do we stay on Bonneville and just pay the Bonneville price, or do we move to something else? Looking at the Bonneville pricing, and which we don't know what it'll be out in those years, but the Bonneville pricing right now, starting next rate period under the existing contract, tier two prices in the first year of that rate period are $70.67 per megawatt hour. And contrast that with our tier one price in FY 24 averaged about 37.75. So it's significantly bigger. But here again, only a small percentage of our load is at tier two. We don't know yet what that tier two price will be under the new contract first rate period. So this non-federal resource options, I just listed several options. I'm not going to go through all of them. Obviously, number one, we're pursuing now. We could if you were short and wanted to get some non-federal to complement your Bonneville tier two price power, you could go short term, do a bilateral contract, 2 to 5 years, something like that. You could go after a resource that was totally carbon free, it's nuclear or something else. Ruby Flats. Yeah. You could go that direction, the solar project. It's really up to the customer to tell Bonneville what the customer wants to do, and you've got to do it on a forward-looking basis. You can't just say, okay, next year, we're gonna do this. You actually have a resource exhibit that you have to, submit to Bonneville. That lists, okay, we want, 4 megawatts, Bonneville at tier 2. Short-term tier 2 price, and the other megawatts, we're gonna use a resource. We don't have to identify that resource initially, but you have to tell Bonneville that percentage split, either you're not gonna get any non-federal, or you're gonna get some non-federal, some, third-party, resource. But then you have to do that ahead of actually, acquiring the power.
I'd be interested in exploring some of these options,
Yeah,
just, I mean, to know, like, if we're, at least to get some estimate of what might pencil out in comparison to a tier 2 rate. If we're only talking about making a difference of like 5 megawatts or something, that's not too
well,
much.
it's 9, right?
Oh, right,
And it's 9 actual delivered. So like, for example, if we did solar, we would need to build a 30 megawatt type of,
Yeah,
Firm to
issue-
be firmed in.
yeah, with firm and ancillary services, we're looking at $120 a megawatt hour,
Yeah, it's over 100.
for Ruby flats.
But like,
locally.
let's say
Well,
like,
your installation's not as good here, so you probably end up with about the same answer.
Okay.
say we added like 10 or 12 megawatts of storage.
Well, but that doesn't solve the average load problem.
Yeah, our load's flat,
Yeah,
so batteries don't help us because they help where you're taking the peak off and putting it in the valley, and our load's flat.
Well, I mean, the idea though would be we buy off peak and then add to our daytime or our base load, right? Well, I guess I see what you're saying. It needs to be there all the time. It needs to, yeah. So,
Yeah, if we just try to make an arbitrage argument, that's one I'm going in Spokane, that's one of the seminars is, arbitrage for battery storage. So I'll find out about the economics of that from today's stuff.
that'd be great to, hear your report back on that. Brian, do you have any ideas of what might be realistic, or are we just tier 2?
Well, I can kind of get into that farther here in the slides, but,
Oh, yeah, sorry. that's your next
one
slide.
comment here is about tier 2 price. I call it market minus.
Yeah,
It's, and reason it's better than market. And the reason it's better is because for a 2-year or 3-year rate period, you're buying that tier 2, you're gonna get, it's firm power delivery. You don't have to worry about whether or not that resource conks out during that time period. And it's got a fixed price. And it's fixed, it's not, you're not paying more 1 month, like right now on the tier 1, you pay different rate each month. It's still a great rate, it's hard, you don't beat tier 1. But tier 2, it's a flat, 24/7. It's a block that you're buying and the price stays the same for each year of the rate period. So you know what you're getting, you know what's gonna cost. It's very easy to manage that.
And Bonneville provides delivery and ancillary services.
Yeah, it's all built in.
Yeah, it's-
Whereas if you go on the market, you've got to build around what you purchase all this other stuff, and it's hard to.
Well, then you gotta tag and dispatch your resource. And so you either do that internally or you hire someone to do it.
How closely do you work with, so we're going to be using more tier 2 because BP is doing something. Phillips 66 is doing something, so, I mean, if the ratepayer agrees to pay for tier 2, you tell them kind of upfront what that's
Yeah.
gonna look like,
And in
and,
fact, the
yeah.
Phillips 66, the electrolyzer to the liquid, that's the next big process load. We approached them and said, look, because to get full tax credits for that, they need carbon-free power.
Mhm.
And so we presented the whole Ruby Flats to them. And they were like, yeah, okay, that seems reasonable. They haven't given us anything in writing. But
Yeah.
on the other hand, we haven't got a firm offer in writing from Energy Northwest yet.
Mhm.
There's that timing issue.
And we still have an internet issue. Right?
Yes, but when you get on the Bonneville system, if they've got room, which they would for us, so
Okay.
we were okay there.
Okay.
That was one of the features that made that real desirable, but you still gotta have the ancillary services and the firming. That's what jacks it up to over $100 a megawatt hour. All that being said, Phillips was fine with that. The issue was, because that's how they got their full credits. There was a change in the law at the end of the Biden administration, and basically, Washington State was one of the only states that was recognized where our grid was clean enough that to qualify for full tax credits, all you had to do was buy power off the grid.
Mhm.
You didn't have to have a specially dedicated non-carbon source, which was the prior requirement.
Mhm.
I don't know if Phillips has really done a deep dive on that, kind of realized that. If I was them, I'd be looking at, well, gosh, you know, what's the difference between reflats and tier two?
Tier two is less, we know that.
Well, at
Right
least for
now.
the next 3 years.
It's more like 70 to 80, right?
Yeah.
Dollars per-
70, and actually, in the next 3-year rate period, 70 the first year, it actually goes down to $67.
Like,
the
who can
next
touch
year.
that? Who can touch
That's
that?
the issue.
Even now, who can touch that?
So using tier two is not a problem for us unless,
It's really.
unless we're looking at municipalization, which then it becomes a problem,
Yeah,
correct?
then
Yeah.
the whole supply situation changes.
Mhm.
I mean, that's, you know, long-term why you look at the geothermal and is there some kind of base load that you can grow that's cheaper than the
Right.
market? And, you know, that's what gives you that ability.
PUC's retail rate's now over 120 from in a megawatt hour. So,
Yeah, and that's right.
so it's, tier two sounds good.
Yeah.
Next, thank you.
I love
No
it.
explanation here, other than my two favorites, first of all, is the bottom center is mules. Transferring,
Was that the first dynamo?
this is a grain crushing. Basically transferring the energy, and basically you got a rotating shaft. It's great. You got fusion over the right bottom corner, which is Chris's. All of our hope, actually, if fusion could come on, it would solve a lot of problems. So anyway, nothing else about that. Next slide, please. And this is just some of the milestones coming up, just to impress upon you, this is gonna happen fairly fast. Right now, Bonneville is talking with the customer groups on the basic, the bones of the contract, the templates, you know, for the 3 different prototype contracts, et cetera. They've been doing this has been ongoing for over 2 years. But it's gonna start getting serious in April, because Bonneville will contact us, and Bonneville is gonna wanna know what type of contract we want. Or if we want a contract, we have the option of that, not taking a contract. Then by June, we have to tell them for sure, yes, we want a contract and what the type is. And then they'll offer in that August, September timeframe. By December, I won't give the actual, got actual dates in here, but I just ignore that, because it'll slip a few days one way or the other, but in December, beginning December, we have to sign the agreement. And then Bonneville will sign the agreement after we returned it, and that agreement is executed, but not enforced in the sense that we're not gonna start buying power under this agreement. But we have to make those decisions, this year. The next slide is just more granularity in terms of the timeline. I won't go through it, the high points are on the other. And now for the spoiler alert, there are staff recommendations here at the end, which is the next slide. What staff would propose, what I would propose is that we sign another load following agreement. As a utility, we're not in a position to manage our own power supply at this point. We're placed under this agreement, we place the risk on Bonneville. Doesn't mean we can't start looking at acquiring our own power to supplement, and then, you know, as the utility grows, if we have a takeover of fusion, or we, you know, the city of Lane agrees they want us to, whatever.
Or you get some organic growth at Cherry Point, or
If we get significant growth, then
Municipalization,
we
whatever.
can revisit. The other thing I would do in this first rate period under the new contract, I would say 100% Bonneville for tier two. I don't know. You know, my thought is, and I talked to Chris about this, but unless we are really exposed to tier two, I mean, 20, 30, 50 megawatts, it's really difficult to play that, let's purchase a small resource, unless you're gonna do it in aggregate with, say, Energy Northwest aggregates a bunch of small utilities that each one needs 2 or 3 or 1. And in total, you're looking at 20, 30, 40 megawatts. Then you've got some economies of scale. If you're gonna go out and do a bilateral contract to purchase, you've got more clout. If you're purchasing 40 or 50 megawatts, hey, I wanna buy 2 megawatts, I wanna buy, you're gonna be the last in line, I hate to tell you, and the transaction costs for going out and acquiring a small resource are quite high. So my recommendation would be, first time out of the chute, just go 100% Bonneville. Meantime, you've got this preparation, start looking at these other resources you might be interested in. But don't pull the plug in the first rate period. Be prepared to do it if you want in a second, depending on, you know, Bonneville's cost structure too. That's the other thing. We'll sign this contract this year. We don't know what prices will be when this contract goes in force FY 29 or in 2028. We won't know what tier 1 prices are. We won't know what tier 2 prices are. So, there's sort of a guessing game there. But we've got to sign, we got to make some elections before them. Chances are Bonneville tier 2 is still, unless they totally change the methodology and how we do it, it's going to be a market minus, because they'll supplement their power supply for tier 2 with any surplus hydro they might have or other things. They've got an ability to do that. So you won't have full market exposure with a tier 2 product. Just won't. I've already mentioned it. The third thing is, be exploring your non-federal options and be ready to pull the trigger on when the timing is right. And you have a necessity to do it because you've got a large load growth or Bonneville's pricing for tier 2 has gone through the roof. And with that, I'll stop, see if there's any questions.
Well, yeah, thanks, Brian, for shepherding this process for our organization for many years. What's the last, it was several years ago that last time we went through, this topic and approving the last, iteration of contract with Bonneville. It was like 4 years ago, was it?
Well, regional dialogue contract actually was signed in 2008.
Okay. I remember we had an interim. I think that's when we started pursuing Ruby Flats, when we started.
Yeah, that was more a discussion of tier 2, whether we want to go Bonneville or go something else. That's when we started looking at Ruby Flats, yeah.
So just one of the things to think about for you guys. When you look at the second or third rate period of the new contract, you're looking out into the early to mid 2030s. And at that time, you're probably going to be looking at a changing, in a good way, transmission and generation mix. So I think at some point we'll figure out how to build transmission lines. That being said, we're going to have lots more, generation and storage options that will tend to be more distributed in nature than central station in nature. So, you're gonna have some of that happening. At the same time, Bonneville is gonna be changing. So the amount of power available from the federal system never goes up. It always goes down. And it's been going down every year since the Bolt decision. And unless we build some large dams, I can't even imagine where, I don't see that. You may see some power come to us through Energy Northwest, through the federal system for new fission reactors or fusion reactors, as the case may be. And I think you're going to see some geothermal come online in Washington State, some of which will be developed by public power and may be available through Bonneville. So I think you know, our recommendation today is all in with Bonneville, load following, let's keep it simple because we are simple. And, you know, so I'm really looking for the three of you to say, yes, do that. And then we're gonna be bringing back some things to execute, but I think at the end of the year, what I'll ask you to do is to authorize me to go ahead and execute that contract. And then if they send it to us on Christmas Eve or whatever, we don't have to call a special meeting, I just sign it. So. That's kind of my summary of where it is, and Brian, we are really gonna miss you. I don't know anybody else that knows this at the level that you do, and you've been in it for so long, and, you know, thank you for getting us to this point.
Yeah. Okay to say it. It's been a long haul.
Any questions from the commission? I have one item. Go ahead.
You can go first.
Okay, well, I'm wondering if it's, if this is the time to bring this up also, or maybe at a later time, with, you know, you're thinking of how we move forward over the next several months. We have a solar installation here at the PUD, which is 30 kilowatts, no,
I think it's 20.
20 kilowatts, yeah. And I'm just wondering, if, a, ground mounted in a couple megawatt type of facility, which I remember previously we could potentially build here. Where that might come in and potentially be viable for competitive, you know, now that Ruby Flats is so expensive compared to, when we started talking about Ruby Flats, we were talking about being able to compete with tier 2. When we, maybe real early in the process, Brian, maybe you knew better a lot sooner than I did, but, I remember people telling me that, oh, it's possible to make solar at the bus park for 40 hours a megawatt. You know, I remember people telling me that. I remember me telling you that and you say, yeah, 2 of those, I don't know where those numbers are coming from.
Well, and in Arizona,
Huh?
in Arizona,
Yeah.
Ruby Flats, the last time I looked, was $65
at the bus park. Yeah, so we did take a look at that when we proposed and executed on the one on the roof over there.
Yeah,
And kind of the answer was, well, to get a megawatt, we'll take up all the rest of the land we've got here, the little field across the street, everything out here.
and
Because
we have to hire a shepherd too, because I want the sheep underneath those panels, okay?
yeah, so yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of ways to manage that.
And a wool shear and everything. Just-
And now you've got Jamie smiling.
Yeah, but I'll manage that.
So when we looked at that and Kurt ran the numbers and actually worked with the consultant, it was not even close.
Okay,
The issue was that, you know, if you've already got a structure that can support the building with roof and a built-in electrical
yeah,
system.
that's what everybody says about solar, right?
Yeah,
I
but
just-
no, and we took a look at it earlier this year, to see if things had changed, and it did not, unfortunately. And plus, the other thing that we wanna do, if you're gonna do that, because of the spiky nature, is you'd wanna couple it with some storage. And right now, solar plus storage is more expensive than straight solar and buying firming from the market. So it's, you know, that's kind of the, we keep looking at that. And I keep looking at local wind. I haven't pinged my 2 guys this year, but I keep pinging them.
Yeah, as in my side life, I'm working on developing with a rural, the farmer, a small, wind project. He has got the wind resource, looks like, to be able to make it work, so. But anyway, yeah, but it's not practical. probably.
Well, and we just couldn't get it big enough.
And connected to our substation, like where the wind resources is Galbraith and then out on the peninsula. And then how do we get the power from there to our,
Yeah, to intertie with.
interties, yeah.
Be curious if, in conversations with the customer for our refinery, have they seriously explored, like behind the meter on-site generation capacity to go along with their new electrolyzer?
They have looked at that and rejected it based on costs.
Based on cost, tier 2 is gonna be a better deal for them.
The other interesting thing is that we have a high load factor utility. We're all industrial load, so we're running 24/7 with not much load variance. You stick an intermittent resource behind the meter, the load starts looking like it's varying more, and we need to spending more on load shifting charge. I mean, there's a
Yeah.
It's just kind of a weird situation based on our rate structure and, you know, what Phillips would do on the backside.
Yeah.
Without storage is keeps coming back to,
Utility would be different.
you know. If you can shape that variable power with storage, then you got something, but then here again, it's a storage cost and.
And
Well,
BP, in other words, BP
I'm
likes us
thinking-
as a customer because our load is stable, and we make their life easier.
Grant, to clarify, I'm not thinking about solar panels, I'm thinking about, utilization of their waste heat energy.
Cogen.
Cogeneration, yeah, and so there's some new modular technologies, like it was also a number of years ago, actually, I had presenters from a company, a Washington State company that come up who was manufacturing these modular supercritical carbon dioxide small generators, which I think were about 5 megawatt units for about $10 million each, which, you know, with the installation cost comes out to something that definitely pays for itself in some short number of years. And they can basically, with just a temperature of like 250 degrees Fahrenheit input, that's all it needs to run and generate 10 megawatt load, or sorry, 5 megawatt load. They do have that, right? So I think like there's some newer, you know, since the nature of the project they're doing, which I saw them go through permitting for a couple of years ago, it's to take a modular hydrogen electrolyzer from Plug Power in Eastern Washington, and it's basically a plug and play thing. They're gonna hook it up to water and power that we provide, and they're gonna generate hydrogen for their fuel process to substitute currently the gray hydrogen production they make from natural gas. So this project will lead to them using less natural gas. It will lower their carbon emissions, help them comply with the Clean Fuel Standard and Carbon Cloud Equipment Act. And as long as we're providing clean power to go along with it, right? Now, we can do that through buying through BPA, but I do think that it's always better just looking at the overall picture of like, we have all this load growth, we need to match it, we need to build new demand one way or another. Whenever we're looking at adding new demand, and granted this isn't huge, but of some significance, if we can match it with new generation at the same time, that's better than rather than just leave it up to, you know, our BPA, since they're doing that anyway. So if there's a way that we could work with the customer here to really help everyone out on the grid and all BPA's customers by helping to match this new demand with new load in a way that's possibly scalable, like through modular units, as if say their hydrogen production expands. I just wonder if they've, to what extent that's all been seriously studied.
You know, we can ping them and ask.
Yeah,
And it's as simple as that.
is
But
P,
I know they've talked about that stuff before, so they've gone through some vetting process to figure it out and included Bonneville's cheaper. But
Yeah.
it'd be okay to ask them to update that, or
Yeah.
what's your latest thinking?
Because economics are changing every year, right?
Right.
so why don't we have that as an action item follow-up? I'm just watching the time I need to give John just a minute to update
Sure.
us on the public records item, and then we need to celebrate Brian.
We have 3 for action items you have to take today.
So we're gonna push off the.
Yeah, Jim.
Push not training again, sorry. John.
What I want to say is, commissioners, we should go on the record on this. You have until the 31st, Commissioner Spotty, Commissioner Erie, to get your training done for the OPMA and the PRA. Otherwise, you'll face the first offense is a $500 personal fine, second offense is $1,000. Because it's a violation of the OPMA not to have your training done timely. And for Chris and Jamie, you have to have done in the last 4 years. So if you haven't had the training in those time periods, go to MRSC, go to the State Attorney General's office, schedule a time with me. We'll get it done by the 31st, but.
So
If you've
AMI,
done it with the PUD,
yes,
you
yeah,
had that training, that's fine. Make sure Lisa has your certificate and let's just confirm it here so we know.
okay, so, do we need to fill out a certificate then?
Usually they give you one when you've completed a conference.
Yeah.
Okay, we didn't get a certificate from Wakuda, did you?
When I did it, they emailed it, I think, to Annette. I don't think Ann, sorry. I don't think I handed them something.
I kind of remember getting something, but I have to go check.
Okay,
When did you take it? When was the conference that you took it? I just
Well,
remember.
the January orientation.
it was January meetings, yeah.
January, it was January, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and
I'll reach
Alina,
out to them.
And
I'll
Lena
talk to
would have
Lena.
proof that both Eddie and I attended.
Okay, I'll talk to
That may
Lena,
be
and if
open.
And then if that's the case, that's what you have, that's good.
Now what about
The
Jamie?
last 4 years, because they were not, since the oath of office was more than,
Yeah, and I've done it
You
twice.
had,
since I've
you
been-
had your oath of
2
office.
years ago.
Yeah, so you had it 2
Yeah,
years. So does that suffice? Okay.
Yeah, if I have any
it's
questions.
within
you
90
can't
days
find
of
me,
taking the oath of office. And for the current term it applies. And then every 4 years.
Yeah, well, Eddie's 90 days is coming up earlier because he swore in December.
December, so, but he took his in January, so he's within the
Yeah.
90 days.
Yeah,
So the
I'm
90 days
just saying
would
if
have
that
would have been
doesn't
different.
suffice, then we
I think
got.
I'm past 90 days now. Yeah.
Yeah, you're past 90 days.
But I did take training. So it's just a question of confirming that we have certification.
Yep.
Yeah, which we can, I'm sure we can
Well,
do it.
Lisa said she's gonna reach out to us.
And why that's important is this is a common audit question for government compliance,
Mhm.
for the state auditor coming in.
Yeah, they should. Yeah.
That's the record.
Well,
And we do this for generally once a year, just for tee-up and staff and everybody sees it.
and it's helpful to have a slide screen presentation on hand still, just as a quick reference document, so.
So to give
There's
your,
a great checklist, I would say, on MRSC if you have questions too, even for Research Service Center.
Absolutely.
so you're looking for head nods from the commission on the general approach.
Yeah, and I recommend BPA tier 1 and tier 2 full requirements.
Okay. And Eddie, you feel like you're ready for that, or do you wanna wait a little bit? Maybe check in with,
I mean,
have some more of your questions answered?
you know, I'm gonna lean towards going with the recommendation.
Yeah.
Granted, you know, for one reason or another, like, you know, it's time we cross that threshold, and at the same time, be exploring for what we can anticipate will be some additional load growth, that we may serve, so. You know, I guess it gets sort of more like a both and, then like I wouldn't wanna, well, what's your sense of like the timeline for needing our go ahead on this, as far as like, what's the, I guess. Were you looking for that today, you were hoping to get that today?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, I mean, it's not drop dead, but by the second meeting in April, it will be drop dead.
okay. Okay,
So I mean, now it's urgent, then it's critical.
okay,
But this doesn't stop us from exploring future options.
Absolutely not.
Yeah,
No, and even if we go into contract.
Yeah.
We have the ability to develop our own resources.
that's right, we can always do that, and then,
Yeah.
like, yeah, I mean.
Yeah, we can always notify them that we're not gonna buy any tier 2 power from you, we're gonna buy on the market.
So the power sales agreement won't like lock us into buying a certain amount of power for a certain length of time, or will?
It'll.
On tier 1.
It'll lock us into an unspecified amount of tier 1 power at an unspecified price for 20 years.
Okay, right.
And incredible.
And that's
So
considered
say
firm,
unspecified
that's
budget.
considered a firm contract.
That's
Right.
correct.
So say, like, so even say like if.
And it's a no fault contract, we got it all.
So if like, even if say P 66, you know, they revolutionize their efficiency and suddenly they need 10 megawatts less than they did before, or not, I mean, or say the new project in a matter of years, then like, we can just sell them less power and it's worth much.
That's right,
And then
just we'd be
EPA
out
has
of,
more.
we'd be out of the tier 2.
Okay, yeah, all right, so then I think, yeah, of course, we should probably move forward with it, yeah.
Okay, and you have my head now.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, yeah.
Jamie, yeah, okay, so we are good for that, thank you very much. We've got two things we've gotta take care of.
Yes, we do.
The PSA for Pacific Surveying, these are the guys that we're using, we've used them all the time. Their PSA expired last year, we need them to do the surveying at the Grandview, land purchase. So, the first action is like you guys to approve for me to sign that PSA.
Okay,
That's action number 1.
you've,
Oh,
we'll review the
sure.
agreement,
If somebody can carry.
Oh, I'll motion to approve.
but Pacific Survey.
Oh, yeah, sorry, maybe say it out. Agree-
Motion to
Approve
approve,
the,
PSA with Pacific Survey Engineers.
yeah, agreement to provide surveying, engineering, environmental services for the purpose of assisting while competing, completing capital improvements and other maintenance projects. Yeah.
I'll second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you. The second thing is the first resolution, and that's to change all the signatories for our checking accounts, basically.
You gotta take Brian off.
You gotta take this
You
fellow
gotta
off.
take him off, you can't let him keep signing.
We're gonna get, Kurt.
There goes your retirement.
Profile.
Modify your retirement plan.
So I would be looking for a motion to authorize changing our signatories.
I motion to approve resolution 874.
A second.
There's a motion and a second. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Thank you, commissioners. Now, the real business.
Yeah, real business.
Why
Most
we're,
important.
why we're here.
I don't know if one of you wants to read the resolution.
Yeah, sure, I'd love to. It's near the end, isn't it? Here we go.
Oh, no, that's, you have that last page here.
There we go.
I'll start with the title. Resolution, Board of Commissioners, PUD, honoring Assistant General Manager Brian Walter.
Whereas Brian Walters has been employed by Public Utility District Number 1 of Whatcom County from July 1st, 2002 until March 31st, 2025. And whereas Brian Walters has had an indelible career in the utility industry spanning 44 years, beginning in 1981 with Seattle City Light, and includes time spent at Chelan PUD, Snohomish PUD, Puget Sound Energy, and Washington Public Utility District Association, where he served as the first Energy Services Director. And Conservation and Renewable Energy Service Systems, a consortium of utilities serving as their first director upon their foundation. And whereas the Board of Commissioners of the Public Utility District Number 1 of Whatcom County and the district staff are indebted to Mr. Walters for his willingness to serve the public and the district faithfully, with the best interests of the district always foremost in his actions, and having given generously of his time, talents, and sense of humor. Now therefore be it resolved that the members of this commission do hereby express their sincere appreciation and appreciation of the people of Whatcom County for Brian Walters' service to the district and for the privilege of having worked alongside him. Be it further resolved that the members of this commission extend to Mr. Walters their sincere best wishes for the future, and that this resolution be recorded in the official minutes of this meeting, and that a copy thereof be delivered to Mr. Walters, adopted by the Board of Commission of Public Utility District Number 1 of Whatcom County at a regular meeting held this 25th day of March 2025. Thank you, Brian, for your service.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any comments?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I'll say a couple. And for those of you who know me well, I hate talking in public, but that's okay. You know, I look back, I've been in the utility, as your resolution said, I've been in the utility business for over 40 years. And, you know, in the beginning, I was eager to learn as much as I could in different things. And so I'd move around a lot. I've only, prior to coming to Whatcom PUD, I'd only worked at other organizations. The longest was 5 years. And so having the privilege and the ability to stay here this long has been great. You know, I look back, and when I came on board as a PUD, it was probably the reason I came on board is because of the West Coast energy crisis. Prior to working here, I was an energy consultant working on energy supply and contracts for other utilities. And when that West Coast energy crisis hit, the consulting money dried up, just flat. Utilities were not, they cut their outside consulting budgets and were really hunkering down because of the cost of energy was just killing them. And fortunately for me, Tom Anderson, who was the general manager at the time, I had already done some work for the district on energy supply matters, and he offered me a position. And so, wow, gee, honey, we may have income next month. So I came to work here thinking that a few years, we'll see how it goes, and then it's on to the next thing. Well, almost 23 years later, I'm still here. And, you know, as I look back on it, the reason I'm still here is really the staff, the people I work with. It's been great. You know, you could always count on them. They back you up. I liked what we were doing. And if there's one thing I've learned in 47 years in the utility business is that as long as you take care of your customer, if you provide them services that are valuable and reliable, and your customers are successful, that's the best benefit you can bring to the community at all. That takes care of it. And that utilities are in the infrastructure business and services off that infrastructure, and that's where the focus should be. And everything else will flow along with that. So, the other thing is that this group that you got here, when there's a crisis, that's when they really step up. You know, I saw that in spades with the water crew when I first came on board, and you had frazzle eyes or no questions asked. They pitched in, everybody came in, stayed late, worked too many hours, froze too many fingers. But everybody, electric crews, water crews, they all pull together when there's a crisis. Saw it again when our 24-inch line was punctured a few years ago. They all step up, and you don't see that in a lot of organizations, but it is here. So I guess with that, I'll shut up and just, once again, thanks for allowing me to stay here for almost 22 years and not overstay my welcome, so.
No, you're definitely not overstated. We like to keep you, but we want you to have a life. Any other comments? I'd like to make a brief comment. I just want to say how much I appreciate you as a commissioner's been able to, work with you the longest, that's here right now. I'm sure all the previous commissioners also feel the same way, how much you're appreciated by, those commissioners that are no longer with us. Meaning still on the planet. No longer on this commission.
Oh.
But that wasn't your fault. So, the point is that, really appreciated the amount of capacity you bring to the organization. And that will be sorely missed. And you've worn so many hats, but you still managed to do it with significant style and integrity and focus. And that's why I think you've been so level-headed in so many of the crises that we've had to deal with at the PUD. So that will be missed, but you know, we'll rise to the occasion. And the last thing I want to say in my personal experience is that, you know, when I got elected, I didn't realize I had an unsubstantiated mandate from the public, this issue of broadband. I was really between a rock and a hard place. You know, Steve and the other commissioners told me too, there's not a lot of love for doing broadband here at the PUD. And the patience that you had with me and the time you spent to help me figure out how we learn from our lessons and chart a pathway that's not idiotic for this PUD, a reasonable pathway to get involved. And I know a lot of that was your effort behind the scenes, leading from behind. And I just appreciate that personally so much. And, you know, I wish I could have said every time I appreciated you, sometimes because obviously respecting our GMs, I don't always get to tell you that personally, but I can feel what a powerful influence you've been on this organization. So thank you personally.
Well, thank you, Commissioner. Of course, my patience is infinite. Not infinite.
Yeah, I'll just add, yeah, Brian, you do have a good energy, and you know, from our first meeting, I always really appreciated your warmth and kindness. And for me, it's a very short time together. I regret not having more time to benefit from all of your, you know, all your knowledge and experience here. And but I'm sure you'll be missed, and yeah, I'm wishing you very well.
Thank you.
Oh, everybody's looking at me. I'm really bad at goodbye speeches. It's been a pleasure working with you. I will definitely miss your steadfastness here at the PUD and your humor. I don't know if everybody in the room got the carousel joke with the slides, but yeah, it was funny. Good luck to you.
All right. There's anything else for the good of the order? We had commissioner reports.
Come back Friday for cake.
Yeah, we'll come back Friday for cake, but we can let our commissioner reports live. Great, well, thank you all for coming. Of course, thanks for staff for supporting Brian and, Rick, it's a great team here. I'm glad to be part of it.
Are we gonna do public comment? Because it looks like Rick might wanna have.
Oh, please, yeah,
right, yeah.
let's let Rick, say something.
This could be entertaining. Oh, I gotta go to my office.
Oh,
One second.
Should we call Robin so he can have her?
Yeah. Who appreciates them?
Oh, really? Cause I'll say. Brian and I were joking beforehand, we would spend hours in this room working on Infinite, going back.
Yes.
And, you know, on a big whiteboard that was this wall, every issue that we could come up with, how could you make it happen? And knowing that every time we came back and discussed it, you had two gentlemen in the back of the room that would take everything we just worked on. And because we would have to get a contractor approval for the next venture, and they'd go cut the deal with that next customer, and they'd go string the fiber. So it was just a constant chasing the tail. That project.
Rick,
Good morning. I would also like to pass along my thanks for the many years that I worked with Brian, representing Phillips 66 and predecessor companies. Anyway, Brian, congratulations on your retirement. I wish you nothing but the best in whatever your endeavors may be going forward. Enjoy, and thank you very much.
Thanks, Rick.
okay, well, with that, Rick, anything else to say? Thanks for speaking up. All right, we'll close public comment. If there's nothing else for the good of the order, call the meeting to close.
Actually, Commissioner, before you do that, you have to approve, you have to make a motion and approve. the
Oh,
resolution.
thank you. Thank you. Awesome.
But wait a minute, if you don't do that, you can't retire.
Can we table this? Okay, I'll move to approve the resolution.
Resolution 875.
Last second.
There's a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, now we'll call the meeting. Thank you.
10:41.
So Commissioners, my,
My office will.
fitness instructor, one of my kids, instructor is telling out.
Walk around.
Like,
Yeah, she talked to me.
I think he's not going to her.